Hello, this is Bricky, also sometimes known as John Warhammer, also known as guy who may have made you spend $1,000 plastic soldiers, also known as guy who needs to go outside more often. Hey, how's it going? DARKTIDE is out in a beta. Woo! It's a closed beta. I got in. You didn't. Haha. Laugh, laugh. No, it's a lot of people got in, obviously. This video is just a little bit of an overview. This is coming out on a Sunday. I'll actually be streaming today as well over on twitch.tv/Bricky with the people over at Girls Play TV. They have we've collabed a few times before, and we're doing a pretty awesome stream at 2 p.m. Pacific Standards Time today, the day this video comes out. So go check it out. And if you miss it, then just hey, go watch my stream anyway, because I like people to say hello, and that's great. So, DARKTIDE is in closed beta. It is here for the weekend, and it is probably gone by the time you watch this, if you watch this at least one day late. It was coming out late November. Thoughts on the video game? Let us go ahead and start with the negatives, actually, this time around. Normally I go positives and the negatives, but I'd like to do negatives first, because I think that the negatives are actually far and away the more important issues, maybe, sort of, or at least they're more broad, but they're easier to describe. First things first, servers are terrible, though I'm not gonna really go on that a whole lot because it's a beta. I lose connection to the servers all the damn time. I get disconnected from lobbies all the damn time. I have a long time it takes to get into the whole game. It's all pretty crap. It's not the worst I've seen. It's also far from the best I've seen. Better than Overwatch 2's launch. Haha. Though I'm a little concerned because this is a closed beta and they're having these issues. So, beta, it's fine, but it's closed beta, not completely open beta. So a little worried about when the game actually comes out, full stop. So we'll see about that one, because then it'll be open to everybody. So a little bit concerned there, but it's beta, whatever. Optimization, you could also beta this away a little bit, but this one's a little bit more toughy. I've crashed 2 or 3 times, I think, in total. Nothing too terrible. And I never crashed during a mission, which is great. I've always crashed in the hub world or in the loading screens, which is the best time to crash, if I'm being totally honest. So that hasn't been too terrible. The loading screens themselves take quite a long time. Though I must admit, I really do appreciate flipping through all of their imperial gospel and propaganda quotes on the front, because they are very on point and very funny to read sometimes. Just the level of bigotry and hatred that comes out of it is it's just so strong, and it's very Imperium. But despite all of that, my crashes have been not too numerous, but there still have been a couple. Optimization is pretty poor. I noticed that. Now, my computer is a little bit older than the rest. I am running it on a Ryzen 7 and a 1080 Ti. The 1080 Ti is a baller of a card and served me very well. There are very few games I have issues with. This might be one of them. The 1080 Ti is chugging a little bit. I would say that I get mostly 60, sometimes dipping frames per second in regular combat, and then when you get to giant horde melee, it can chug pretty bad, specifically when you smack 10 poxwalkers with one big sword sweep. It can really start to hit you. You get some lag when the mission starts and all that, but that's totally fine. I don't really mind that. There's some texture pop in here and there on some of the characters, especially when you were building your own character. It starts off kind of poor, and then as you're building them up, you can see the textures pop in. Optimization in terms of that is pretty iffy. I don't have too many issues internet-wise. The rubber banding itself is not that bad. I don't have any connection issues, with the exception of the server pulling, but I don't really get a whole lot of what feels like server lag, like hit registration or ping issues or packet loss. Most of that's pretty good. I'm mainly having issues with chugging frame rates and a couple stutters and the crashes. And as far as negatives go, that is mainly the big ones, because everything else about this game is pretty fucking good. I'm not gonna lie. This might be the best Warhammer 40k aesthetic game I have played. I don't think I played a single other Warhammer title that has nailed the aesthetic of the world as well as this one has. Mechanicus is pretty good. Dawn of War is pretty good, but I must admit, like, you know, Space Marine doesn't quite hit that level. I mean, its architecture is pretty good, but Darktide's overall feel, the world where everything is a grimy, gross manufactorum that is under control of religious zealots. Everything is a church while simultaneously a production facility. And you are meat to be churned in the Emperor's glorious name. It is nearly perfect as far as aesthetic goes. It is nearly perfect. I am shocked. It is made, I mean, it was made by the Vermintide people who, I will be honest, I don't much like Vermintide. Now, I'm not a huge fan of fantasy stuff in general, so I have a pretty hefty bias here. The Vermintide really didn't sell it for me. Granted, I didn't give it, I think, quite enough of a try. I could have, I think I made my decision, my judgment a little too early. But I'm not a big fan of fantasy, so I kind of was like already not too big on it to begin with. But it's obviously made by people who understand Warhammer. And these people, Fat Shark, get Warhammer. Darktide aesthetically is the game if you want a pretty damn lore accurate situation there. It's not perfect. I actually think Ogryns might be a little bit bigger in lore, which is shocking because, like, the dude is fucking huge. But I think they're actually a teensy bit larger in lore overall. And there's a couple other things, like the Psyker might be a little too sassy. Psykers are often pretty unhinged when they're Imperial Sanctioned Psykers like that. And they say some things that would probably get them fucking shot a lot of the time. But it's, you know, you have to give them a little bit of leeway. Like the Ogryn's also a little too smart, I think. But again, you got to give them a little bit of leeway. It's still a video game. If you want good banter, you can't make one of them literally a frothing lunatic and the other one dumb as a brick. I should know. I have an expertise in bricks. But lore-wise, overall, like, these are the tiniest nitpicks. These are barely even nitpicks. You need a microscope to look at those nitpicks when it comes to the overall feel of the world. When it comes to gameplay, the only issue I have is the frame rate issues, because overall it feels very responsive. I have spent most of my time playing as the Preacher and the Sharpshooter, so I haven't had a whole lot of time playing as the Psyker or the Ogryn at all. So I make that clear that I haven't played enough of them to get a good feeling on them, but I played the Sharpshooter by far the most and the Zealot number 2. The Zealot is very fun. It is an interesting kind of concept to have that level of melee damage on a squishy frame character. And in reality, you maintain your tankiness by being in combat, which is a very interesting thing. The Ogryn is just a giant piece of beef, but the Zealot is much more of a survive through bloodshed, which is a very Zealotist Preacher way to go about it. Absolutely love it. I was playing some with Luton. You may know him from some of his videos. And he was like a level 17 Zealot. He put some work into her. And he, with a Thunderhammer, was just crunching people. He would just fly in there and barely ever die. The only time he ever went down was by a special character. Overall, he was pretty nutty in terms of how good he was rolling around with her. I like her a lot. I think she's a lot of fun. The VA work, if I haven't already said this, to go along with the feel of the game, is incredible. This is it must be so much fun working on a Warhammer game. It must just be so enjoyable to VA for a Warhammer game, because it's so incredibly over the top that it just turns around to being so fun. The Preacher is insanely crazy, and I love it. The Sharpshooter is such an asshole. The Psyker has like this really German voice that I find hilarious. And then the Ogryn is the Ogryn, which is great. The banter and the quips between all of them are pretty incredible. I think they did a great job with that. They're almost always very funny and have a lot of great humor between them all. Like I said, played as the Sharpshooter for quite a while. The Las Gun is really good. I like the feel of the Las Gun a lot. It doesn't quite have the sound effect that I believe Las Guns have in the lore, which is more of like a snap, more like a crack, like a fizzle, like a fizzly crack sound. It has a bit more punch to it, But I think that's probably a good idea for in terms of the actual game and making the sound effects solid. You can actually hear that fizzly crack a bit more in the last round of your magazine, but just landing headshots with this thing is a whole new level of beautiful. It sounds like heaven. The sharpshooter is, I might argue, one of the best characters in the game. I'm not fully sure. They all have their place. Ogryn's a meat shield and great at horde clearing. The Zealot is just really good, consistent DPS. The Psyker is incredibly powerful single target DPS, just where you can find... The Psyker, so long as they don't overdo it, can one-tap basically most special enemies and do a really good job with it. But it's only one-tapping. And the Sharpshooter is just very high damage and taking out, obviously, people from the distance. It's pretty great when I activate my special ability and I just 3-tap a special enemy like a Tox Flamer or one of those big gunner guys, or I'll roll into an entire squad of Traitor Guardsmen and just clear them all out with well-placed headshots. The Sharpshooter has a really good high skill reward for them. Having good aim with them, like headshot multipliers on the Sharpshooter is very high, and being able to just go pop, 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 headshot, headshot, headshot is so incredibly satisfying, but also genuinely effective. Like, putting body shots in is pretty good too, but if you're able to constantly land those headshots, this guy is just insane with the amount of damage he can put out. It's really fun. I love just the Cadian guardsmen you can have, which also they give you purple eyes if you're from Cadia, which is such a good touch. Good job. I have my Cadian guardsman. Of course I do. Because you know me. Of course I have him. And he's just such an excellent character to play. I like his abilities. I like his weapons, both melee and ranged. I like his grenade a lot. Overall, the Sharpshooter feels excellent to play. They all feel generally pretty good to play. From everyone else who I play with, I played on stream with DK. He played Psyker and Shy, my members of Death Ridiculous crew, for those of you who aren't familiar. Played the Ogryn, and it's pretty fun to see how they play as those characters and the powers they have. It's decent amount of good diversity in terms of how the characters feel and the role in the game. And I think they nailed that really well. I think that the actual gameplay and the sound effects of the weapons are top tier. The sound effects of the las gun, and even just the auto gun, and the sound of the chain sword and the hammer hitting enemies, all just have such a weighty punch to it, which is only accentuated by the top level soundtrack that they threw up into this game. The soundtrack in there is just, it's phenomenal. It is some of the best Warhammer music out there. The main theme is great. I kept it like Skaven and Fiddle. The combat music is really good. It's hard to say anything else besides great, amazing, incredible. I'm heaping nothing but praise on this game because all of the aesthetic changes of the game are just to such a degree of polish and level that I love. It has such a great way of selling the 40K universe. Because when the characters sound 40K, the world sounds 40K, and even the music sounds 40K, well, you start to really appreciate that you finally have that game for you, where they can finally nail it, the one you've been wanting for such a long time, considering that often 40K games are kind of trash. You know, there's only maybe one good one every 3-4 years, and it looks like we're about to get another. Moving past that, enemies feel pretty good. I like the variations of them. Like I said, I didn't play much Vermintide, so I'm not as good at knowing the difference between the two of them. I like the combination of some Left 4 Dead style enemies and some in between. Poxwalkers are a lot of fun to kill. They're not very threatening, but they do act as good fodder, which is really what Poxwalkers are for. And have you just wading through a large amount of them and forcing you into melee, while Traitor Guardsmen and their las guns actually hit pretty hard. They can actually really pop some good shots into you, which makes the Sharpshooter really important for taking them out from a distance. The Sniper does ungodly damage when you get to the higher difficulties. He will chunk you, which is not a negative. It probably should be that way, but it's just, woo, he's painful. The Heavy Gunner is pretty tough too. The suppression effect they have is really good. Tox Flamers are not too bad. They're pretty squishy, but when they get to you, when they actually launch their flamer, it can get real bad. Trappers are pretty fun. I like that. They're very engaging as an enemy. I like the bombers are fun as well. Throw a bomb, run away. Kind of a neat concept. Both bombers. Suicide bombers are cool, like their little tick, tick, tick sound effect that gets pretty scary when they get closer to you. Plague Hounds and the weird mutants and the Plague Ogrins are pretty interesting. Plague Ogrins are pretty tough to deal with. They're hard to avoid. But then Luton hit it with a Thunder Hammer, and it did about a quarter of its HP. So what do I really know? Plague Hounds are pretty terrifying when they get on you. They're like hunters in Left 4 Dead, and I find them to be some of the more frightening enemies in a very good way. And some of the other people, like the boss fight that you had, there's an assassination boss fight, and he wields a plasma pistol. And if it was a lore-accurate plasma pistol, I would be a pile of sludge. But it feels like a lore-accurate plasma pistol. That thing is a freight train of damage. The sound effect it makes, just like it feels like you got shot by a plasma pistol. There's a quote in the third Night Lord's book where he's like, I've never been hit by a thunder hammer. It's like, be thankful it was glancing. It did not feel it did not feel glancing. You're still alive. It was glancing. That's kind of the feeling I get with the plasma pistol. It's like, yeah, it doesn't feel like that guy missed, because even if he did, because holy shit, it has like the superheated power of the sun just being shot at you. Very fun. I like the assassination mission a lot. Overall, enemy variety is very good. I like the amount of special enemies they have. I like how certain enemies just have various levels of armor, especially as the sharpshooter, because I'm able to very accurately pop heads on enemies that would take 5, sometimes even 6 body shots to kill. But one good headshot, they just go right down, and it really feels like a sharpshooter. Enemies are good. I would say the level design leaves a little to be like, I don't know. It's hard because you're in a hive city, and the hive city has one look, Church Manufactorum, and there is no other look from a hive city. So it can feel very samey, but I don't really know how they would fix that. The levels are good. I like the levels a lot. They flow well. There's good areas to move through, and I see there's good cover in certain spots, and looking for loot is pretty good. The only problem is they feel very samey, but you know, that's what a hive city looks like. So I'm kind of not sure how to fix that. We'll have to see what the levels maybe look like later on down the line, just because, well, you know, it's in beta. So who knows necessarily how it's going to be in terms of overall aesthetic for the levels from there. Past that, the weapon and upgrade system is pretty fine, or the weapon like purchasing system from the armory. I'm not level 11 yet, so I don't have the fancy armory, but it's a bit bare bones. The UI is a little bit mediocre, I'd say, overall when it comes to buying new gear and equipping new gear. It's basically just pick the thing with the higher number. Obviously, we're all low level, so we'll have to see what the stat line looks like at a much higher level. But overall, right now, I basically only use variations of the lasgun and a couple of variations of the other weapons for the zealots and other melee weapons. I'm glad that the melee weapons have various types of special attacks, like the Katachin sword has a parry, which is kind of fun. But overall, it's not particularly exciting when it comes to purchasing new stuff. We'll have to see how it turns out when you get to a much higher level, because I think I ended the stream at around level 7, I'd say. Final thoughts. I'd say that this is the best feeling and most accurate Warhammer 40k game I've probably ever played. Everything from the world building and art direction is so incredibly good, from voice acting, visuals, sound effects, enemy variety, location variety, everything in between. It's all just phenomenal. And all it needs to do is work out its bugs and make sure there's still a really good end game feel to it, because we rolled through level 1s pretty easily and did pretty well on level 2s. But at level 3s, we just hit a brick wall and we got fucked. So we'll see how the end game works. Problems with the gameplay are things that I can't comment on overall in terms of like balance, just because it's in beta and who knows where it'll be. And I haven't quite figured out what might be the problem situation yet. So overall, I think it's really darn fun. It's looking to be pretty darn good. For $40, this feels like an absolute great source for your cash overall. I'm picking it up and I'll make a review on it, but at the moment, I would say go try it for yourself, but closed beta and all that you probably already have if you got in. And let's just hope they pull it off. Compare this to the Battlefield 2042 beta I played in. Well, there's some differences. Anywho, things are looking up. Hopefully the optimization stuff can be handled pretty well. And I hope to see you on stream sometime. And if not, well, you have a good day.